If there's one thing you can say about the retail real estate industry, it's never boring. From the shift from in-store shopping to e-commerce to omni-channel, from the construction boom of the early 2000s to that great recession that came right after it, from lockdowns to supply chain disruptions and inflation, my guest today, Naveen Jaggi, has been there for it all. Naveen leads retail advisory at JLL. It's one of the largest such groups in the world, and he's ready to answer any and all questions that you've got. Right now, we're going to do an Ask Me Anything with Naveen Jaggi on everything we know about retail. This is the show where we tell all of you everything we know about retail. We broadcast live most Thursdays at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. But you can watch us anytime you want on the web. You can find us on YouTube at everythingweknow.show. So my name is James Cook. I'm coming to you live from Indiana. I research retail and real estate for JLL. So Naveen Jaggi, our guest today, leads all the retail brokerage business for JLL in the Americas. And Naveen is also a big part of why I came to JLL now, I want to say 7+ years ago. Time really flies. He has been such a huge supporter of using retail research to help our businesses, our customers stay informed and to help us grow our business. So I'm really excited to have him back on the show. Without any further ado, I'm going to add in Naveen Jaggi. Hello, Naveen.
Good morning, James. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. So I roped you in to do an AMA, Ask Me Anything. If folks are interested in asking a question, there's a chat box on the screen, and we'll get to as many questions as we can given our about 35-minute-ish time limit. So are you ready to ask or answer any and all questions?
I'm ready to answer anything you got or anybody else has. Absolutely. Bring it on.
I love it, Naveen. I love it. When I do, we often do a little prep for these shows in advance. Other people want all these details. Naveen's like, yeah, whatever. We're good. You roll with it. I love it, man.
Yeah, listen, just like this session here, retail is all about fluidity and unpredictability. So if you stand to a script, I can assure you the script will change before you realize it. So no point in getting all stuck on questions that we have pre-answered. Let's just go with it.
I love it. Okay, well, let's kick it off with an easy one. Let's say you're at a cocktail party and somebody says, Naveen, what do you do? How do you describe your job?
Yeah. How do I describe my job? I describe my job as the funnest job in the world. I get to work with retailers. I mean, think about it the other day, James. Everybody that's listening and everybody that listens in the future is a retail expert, right? Your grandmother, your mother, your wife, your child, they all are retail experts. They have an opinion on where there should be a Starbucks or a Nordstrom's Rack, or why is Macy's there? Why is it over there? All these things intuitively our consumer, our friends, our family understand. So at the end of the day, look, I represent JLL in our retail business globally. And I talk about the fact that whether it's the investor side or the occupier side, my job is to tell them what I believe is happening in the industry and how JLL can help them. That's simply put. But the reality is, what I do for a living is I talk to some of the funnest, most creative people in the industry, and they have great ideas about what retail should look like in the next 5, 10 years. That's what I do.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's so interesting with the retail advisory work that our group does. I mean, one day we're talking about store design, another it's, where do stores go, shopping centers, all kinds of different stuff. You're right. It's so much fun. There's always something new to talk about. Well, let's go back. I want to get a little bit of your background. What's the first time that you worked with retail real estate? Do you tell me about that a little bit?
Oh boy, you threw an interesting thing. Well, because I'm a 4th generation retailer, James, my great grandparents were in the retail business in India. You could say that I've got retail in my DNA pretty through and through, right? But I would say is, look, at the end of the day, when you're in high school, you got to make some money. You got to make some change to pay for your dinners and your movies and stuff. And so I worked in retail outlet like almost everybody on this video likely will have experience. And my first retail gig was working at a gas station. And I can tell you right now that the gas station is the great equalizer, James. Think about it. There's no such thing as luxury gas, but at the end of the day, you can have a Ferrari pull up next to an old beat up, Toyota or something, and every customer is dealing with the same thing. And I kind of learned a lot of life lessons working at a gas station. There's no such thing as luxury, aspirational, middle market, value. It's gas.
Right.
It goes into a Bugatti, and it goes into a Porsche, and it goes into a Corvette, and it goes into so you had to learn to treat people the same. And so my whole philosophy was, I learned early on, everybody's the same at the end of the day. No one's different. And what they want to be is they want to be treated with respect, and they want to be treated with dignity, and the fact that their time is important. That kind of moves all into our life, right, James? Whether you're 16 or you're 60, treating people with fairness and dignity and respect will probably get a lot of answers, a lot of ears perked up. And that's what I learned early on in my life.
Yeah, it's so funny. So many of us, that first job, for me, first many jobs through college and high school and even middle school was like retail.
Sure.
When was the transition into the real estate angle?
So I got into the business of real estate in my late 20s, I would say like the early 90s. I partnered with my father on a couple of real estate deals. We bought some land. We built some retail. We built a couple of gas stations with some retail attached to it. So we did a little bit of retail, kind of figuring it out on the fly, if you will. And that was a great learning experience for my dad and I. And I kind of discovered in that process, I enjoyed the build process. Once the thing was built and was operating, I lost interest. And so I realized that actually the fun part was chasing the dream. But once you caught it, I wasn't that excited. And so that's when I started thinking about the real estate from a services standpoint, as opposed to just continue to go on and build more and more shopping centers and such. I started thinking I wouldn't mind being in the brokerage business, because actually there you get to build a business internally for yourself. And that actually kind of got me thinking about management, where I can actually build a business within an organization like JLL or CB. That's what got me at this business point today.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so we've got some questions coming in. Here's one from Bill. What retail category is the most active? And I'll say by active, we'll say that means opening new stores, because that's what we track.
Well, so the value sector clearly is the most active, right? So Ross is going to open up 100 stores this year. TJX is probably opening comparable. You hear from the dollar sector. So all value and F&B are the two categories that are the most active. I think we all understand that intuitively. But what's interesting is that when you actually start looking around the country at the different companies, you just realize that this opening of hundreds and hundreds of stores, in some cases, Dollar General opening 1,000 stores, they're doing this all over the country. It's not that they're doing pockets, right? Ross Dress for Less just opened up, I believe, 20 plus stores about a couple of weeks ago. 20 plus stores at one time. Talk about an impressive organization, right? These stores are 30 plus thousand square feet, 30, 40,000 square feet. That's a lot of operational expertise coming into opening that kind of volume of stores. So to Bill's question, I would say value sector will continue to drive retail, whether it's value food beverage, entertainment, or fashion, general merchandise. Value is one sector that we have to continue to watch grow.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Everybody likes a bargain, the wealthy, and it's, and with inflation too, you're going for the bargain. Okay, here's another one. How do you see convergence of retail in terms of e-commerce, B2B or B2C marketplaces, and bricks and mortar retail store channels? And there's a part 2. Okay. I'm alluding to digital e-commerce and marketing. Oh, wait, there's a part 3. They just keep coming in. EGS, click and collect, ensuring consistent experience no matter which channel. So what do you think about that convergence of e-commerce marketplaces and bricks to mortar retail?
So look, e-commerce and convergence of e-commerce and brick and mortar, I mean, and a way to answer that question is like we saw a tremendous uptick in BOPIS, for example, buy online, pick up in store. That was a big thing that we heard in the spring of 22. I mean, the spring of 20. You wouldn't think about it much before then, but here's what we found out. What we learned was that there was an expectation that the pandemic was going to alter the US retail universe forever. We were now going to shop online forever. Brick and mortar is going to die. Malls are going to die. Department stores are going to. I mean, this was truly Armageddon, right? That's what we heard, James. But what happened? As soon as America was unleashed to go back out and shop, what happened? We went back out and shop.
Yeah, we couldn't wait.
And so our environment for retail is much different than Europe, where they're much more dense, they're much more urban, and that's where the concentration of shopping exists. But in the US, we're still a suburban US retail society. We still get in our car and drive to Trader Joe's and drive to Whole Foods and drive to Kroger and HEB, et cetera. We're used to getting to our car. So as a result, to answer the question, the convergence is a matter of convenience. The US consumer is looking for convenient ways to acquire key things. But I can assure you, my sense is that the US consumer is not going to be an online shopper predominantly. There's still going to be, 85, 86% of all retail sales take place at the physical location. Because 16%, 15% take place online. I think the big question is, how does the phone change our engagement with our retailer? I believe that the iPad, the iPhone, the computer is the front door to the retail store today. And so it gets us engaged. So what do? We shop online. We buy at the store. We got more educated on what to buy. And that's the convergence to the question that was asked. Is the convergence is the tools that we have at our disposal now make us smarter about what we want to buy. But human nature says we still want to get outside to go buy it. It will continue, but I will tell you that the future of retail to being 20, 25, 30 plus online is not a US future. That's a European future. That's a European present. But for us, I still see the US consumer, and 22 proved it, 21 has proven it. We still want to get outside and shop. And that's why the grocery sector, James, as an example, what did it do? It tripled online and the peak of summer 20. What's it done now? It's come right back. We get back to buying stuff at the grocery store. So the grocery store to me is the ultimate measure of what the US consumer wants to do. And they want to go back and touch and feel what they want to buy.
I love it. All right. These questions are coming in fast. I can't even keep track. They're coming in real fast, Naveen. So here's another one. Do you see longevity? Oh, this is good. So Toys R Us and Macy's, Ulta and Target, like these shop in shops.
Partnerships, yeah.
Do you see longevity in those creative partnerships?
Absolutely. Look, we've seen Target do it. We've seen Kohl's do it. Kohl's with Amazon example. There's many examples where they're shop and shop. Look, at the end of the day, retailers are looking for partners that are like for like. My consumer wants to go and get X, Y, and Z. I want to make sure that when they come to my store, they don't have to leave my store to go to an Ulta shop, for example. They can just find that Ulta product in my store. These partnerships, Toys R Us and Macy's, I think that was a really smart move on Macy's part, because Macy's is the dominant department store today, right? If we've seen what Nordstrom's has talked about, Nordstrom's has moved to Nordstrom Rack. That's where their focus is. Macy's is not emphasizing their growth and their future on Backstage or Market by Macy's. That's a growth vehicle, but they're still looking at Macy's department store as the key anchor for them all. So to me, these partnerships all make sense, and I would anticipate more and more of those partnerships in the future. That's logical.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the Toys R Us partnership. I feel like there's such a white space right now for toys. And it's our biggest, toys is such a big category. I think it's time for somebody to come in and fill that vacuum.
I'm a big believer in the toy sector. Look, we know that Walmart and Target filled in the gap when Toys R Us left. But if you walk into a Walmart and Target today, it's not they have 30,000 square feet dedicated to toys. It's still 3,000, 4,000 square feet dedicated. Every age group in America wants a toy store, right? If you're a grandparent, you're buying a toy for a grandchild. If you're a 5-year-old, you want a toy for yourself. If you're a parent, you want a toy for your kid or your niece or your nephew. It's the greatest underserved sector in the industry. And if the U.S. consumer, which has proven to want to shop physically versus online, continues down that path, we need to have a brick and mortar toy concept. Now, we've seen one, you and I both have one coming from Ukraine called Hello Joy that's done a good job in their small test markets in Mall of America, for example. I think Short Hills, they got a couple of the deals in the works. To me, I would say the toy sector is the biggest opportunity in retail for someone to get it right. If they get it right, they'll crush it.
Yeah, that is a great point. Okay, here's a good one for you. Given the economy, are you seeing retailers pulling back from expansion plans or taking longer to sign deals or waiting for rents to come down before signing deals?
Yeah, Ashley, great question. I'm going to answer it in a couple of ways. So here we are in August of 22, and as I survey the entire country, and even my partners in Canada, no one is talking about how their retailers are saying we're going to slow down, we're going to pull back. No one is saying that. There may be some that are saying it. I'm not hearing it. So let's just first we can assume that there's some people that are thinking it, and there may be some slight slowdown. What's happening is that because of the pandemic in 20, and now because of cost of capital, we're seeing a challenge for space. Retailers, healthy retailers, want to grow. They've got capital. But between the rise in interest rates and the cap rates, now that gap between the two being much closer, or in some cases being inverted, we're seeing a real challenge by retailers to find retail space. So if you want to sign a deal today for a 23 opening or a 24 opening, it's getting harder and harder. So the delays may not become reality because the retailer wants to slow down. The delays in openings may become because they can't get HVAC. They can't get labor to build out their stores. The cost of labor, cost of construction has gone up. Cost of HVAC, as I mentioned, has gone up. Those are the things that are influencing some of the slowdowns, as opposed to a retailer saying, well, I may see some clouds on the horizon, so I'm going to slow down. That's not what they're saying. The slowdowns are because of things that are out of their control, not in their control.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's so many, labor, in the construction industry and just supply chain that are really slowing things down. Everybody I talk to has that story, and it's different materials depending on what month I hear from them, but
Right.
it's
And
always
we're the
something.
country. I mean, if you talk to some parts, like, look, I'm in Texas. It's a pretty strong labor state. So we'll get labor. What we can't get is an HVAC. In other parts of the country, they got plenty of they got plenty of equipment. They can't get labor. These things are imbalanced around the country. And let's also not forget, the pandemic in 20 still has this hangover that we're living through, right? Supply chains still aren't corrected. And we also saw a lot of labor get pulled from some labor pockets, the F&B sector, the restaurant sector, and where'd they go? They may go to work at a warehouse called Amazon because Amazon grew by massive footprints on distribution centers to get fulfillment for their products being sold. So we've had people move out of some of the service sectors to go into different sectors. Well, now we have a shortage. Now we don't have enough air technicians or enough construction guys because when construction volume went down during the pandemic, they shifted to a retailer who had a heavy online distribution platform set up because you could get stuff sent to their home. So we've got to get back to full employment on the service side as opposed to on the retail distribution side, which I think is the next thing to come this fall, next winter, into 23.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question on a topic we've talked about a lot. Bill says, I see urgent care, dental, and now veterinary hospitals seeking highway, commercial, and retail shopping centers. Would these uses be considered retailers at JLL? Oh, that's interesting.
It's a great question. And I would say you are defined by the space you take. So if you take a retail space in a retail shopping center, you are a retailer. 20 years ago, no one thought of Apple as a retailer. They're a retailer.
Yeah.
20 years ago, no one thought of AT&T as a retailer. They're a retailer. And so is a vet clinic. If you're in a mall, you should be thinking of yourself as a retailer. So a lot of people need to understand, I tend to think of our space as helping define who we are, not our own self-reflection.
Yeah, very interesting. And the idea of medical and dental and veterinarians going into these retail spaces, I mean, it makes so much sense. I mean, we've all gone to a doctor that's in one of these far off medical centers that's tough to find. It's so much better being in a retail center.
100%. No one, I shouldn't say no one. Look, the central hospital district, wherever we used to go 10 or 20 years ago, the hospitals themselves learned the parking was challenging. There's 35 floors, which that got confusing. So what did hospitals do? They got closer to the consumer. You know what they did? They took the retail mindset. Let's get closer to the consumer. So at the end of the day, whether you buy a life or a dialysis company, all these things that now consumers need and want, they figured out. Let's get close to the consumer. And which asset class is closest to the consumer? the retail property is close to the consumer. So they take an old, HEB box or whatever box it is, and they turn it into a dialysis center, a medical center. You are in the medical business, but you're also in the retail business.
Yeah. Okay. Bill's got another one. This is Ask Me Anything. So I don't even know if you've got confidentiality around this or not, but he wants to know, what retailers does JLL represent nationally?
Yeah, great question, Bill. We represent a lot. I mean, the list is over 1,000. I don't think you and I have enough time to talk about all of them. So let's just say that we may represent a retailer in New York, which is different than a retailer that we represent in California. So the list is expansive and extensive. So this is probably not the best place for me to list them, from A to Z, but we represent all of them from A to Z.
Yeah, it is no joke. The list is overwhelming. Yeah. I've seen the spreadsheet. I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. But yeah, short answer is a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ashley's got one for us. Thanks for the insights, Naveen. Would you mind elaborating on implications of supply chain, increase of construction costs on landlords? And we sort of touched on this already. Are they having to come up with more creative deals to entice retailers?
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to ask you to entice a retailer to do a deal if you can't deliver a white box to the retailer in time to open up, right? So if you think about a lot of retailers, the way they think in terms of cycles, right? So, Ross opening up 25 odd stores here in July, there's a reason why. They want to get that back to school customer. It doesn't do them as much good to open it up in, say, October as it does for them to open in July. So retailers think in terms of cycles. Target doesn't want to open up their stores in January, February. They want to open their stores, either before school, before back to school, before Christmas. These are certain times in a year when retailers are best opening up stores. As a result, there's kind of hard for retailers to be enticed by a landlord. I think the best way to entice a retailer to open a location and sign a lease is that you can guarantee delivery of their space by a specific time. If the tenant wants delivery by September 1, the landlord needs to be able to give that to them and guarantee that, or there's a penalty to be paid. So I wouldn't say there's an incentivization by landlords to get retailers signed, but in this environment, the landlord who can promise to deliver a space as needed by a specific time is most likely the landlord that's going to win the race between two particular landlords.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, here's one that we had submitted before the show started. How do you manage in cycles? So does it take a different skill set? Because real estate, I should explain for those who don't know, is a cyclical business. It's not quite boom and bust, but it's a real up and down. So does it take a different skill set to handle the ups as it does to manage people during the downs?
Well, we'll just use 20 and 21 as an example, right? So in 20, we had a non-economic slowdown. So you had to manage clients because they were dealing in a kind of in a blank space of no knowledge. We don't know when the country's going to open up. We don't know when the pandemic's under control. So, hey, JLL, what are you hearing out there? So they wanted information. They wanted data. They wanted as much market information as they could get to help them manage their own internal needs. So what you saw retailers do, for example, during the very slowdown of the summer of 20 was they were on pause. They weren't on a stop. They were on a pause. Now look what happened in the fall of 20. We had a massive recovery in 21. Every retail brokerage firm in the industry will tell you that 21 was a whiplash. Well, why was that a whiplash? I like to remind everybody that the whiplash in 21 was because our retailers were smart. They were really smart in 20. They just decided to very quietly start amping up deals in the fall of 20. Well, those deals they were amping up in the fall of 20 or the winter of 20, they materialized into real store openings in the summer, fall of 21. That business, that 9-month lag between starting a deal and opening for business is what you saw in the summer to fall of 21 was smart retailers being aggressive in the fall and winter of 20. That's what got them into that. So we had to manage clients that were quiet and say, listen, this is temporary. Consumers still have money to spend. They've got stimulus. Once they're unleashed to spend, we will spend. So that was to manage them to say, just bear with the momentary pause. In 21, it was move as fast as you can because there's a sale on real estate. Landlords are bringing prices down to incentivize retailers to get deals done in 21. In 22, it's, hey, listen, we've only have control over so much space. Take it now. We don't know when more space is going to come online. So those are the cycles we're managing our clients to, both on the occupier side and investor side, is where's the demand coming from And how do you fill that demand? And then secondly, what's a consumer going to do? We do a lot of consumer studies, right, James, between you and I. We do a lot of consumer surveys, back to school surveys, for example, Christmas buying surveys. All those surveys tell us that consumers, for the most part, are still fairly bullish on the economy. A slight tap down in back to school because of some of the unknowns, and that's also being managed. But our job was to manage our consumers, our investors, and our occupiers on what we think is happening. They're taking our word and their own research to make decisions for 22 and 23. So information and research becomes our most valued asset during a downturn, as well as during a recovery.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to back up that point because we just did our back to school survey and we asked people first if inflation was going to affect their back to school spending, and the majority said yes. But then we sneakily went in and asked them what their budgets were for shopping and compared them with budgets last year, and then accounted for inflation and realized even accounting for inflation, they're still going to be spending more this year than last year. So it's almost like you've got to use your research to figure out not what people say, but what they're actually going to do, because at the end they vote with their dollars, right?
Look, we say in retail all the time, pay attention to what the consumer does, not what they say. Because look, at the moment, as a current example, look at the moment today. We have a stock market that's stabilized. So you've recovered some of your losses in your 401, et cetera, in your retirement. Secondly, gas prices are down about 70 cents from its peak 6 weeks ago. 70 cents. That's real money back into consumers' pockets. So between the stock market recovery and inflation starting to tamp down, right? That's real money back in the consumer pocket. And what are they going to do? The used consumer has time and time again shown that when they're given some money to use, they'll do a couple of things. They'll knock down the credit card and they'll buy stuff. But in both cases, that's good news for the retailer.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's one from Kim. She asks, can you speak to the challenges retailers are facing with regards to staffing, and then how automation may be the trend to support the site location, and how rising wages are adding to the pressure of the retailer?
All right, Kim, great questions. I think maybe question 1 and 3 are somewhat tied together because now you have a shortage of staffing, so you have to move to automation. Now you have a couple of challenges here. Do we move to automation or do we increase wages to get people? Well, I think a lot of that depends on your business. If your business is really tied to consumer facing, you're going to have to increase wages to pay for that worker to work in your store. And I'll use Best Buy as a great example where I think they got it right, and they showed that if you give the consumer personal service, they'll come into your store. If you think 5 years ago, Kim, people are watching Best Buy on the death list and saying, hey, that retailer's dead, because they sell computers and laptops and TVs and phones and all that stuff you can buy online now. But why did Best Buy have a massive jump in sales back in 19 or 20? Big, one of the shining stars of the market back in 1920, because they invested in personal service, because the stuff they're selling is very confusing. I mean, who ever thought about a TV having a widget? I don't even know what a widget is, but you can buy TVs that have widgets in them. Well, you need someone smart in a blue shirt to tell you how to navigate the widgets to watch the shows you want to watch. But when you figure it out, you realize it's actually pretty easy to watch what you want to watch. So my sense is that retailers that have a very strong customer-facing offering, the stuff they're selling requires customer-facing staff, you have to increase your wages. I don't believe automation is the future of retail. Again, I think we showed that between 20 and 22. Consumers want to get out. We want to get out. And when we want to get out, we don't want to talk to a vending machine to buy a shirt. I mean, how many times have we as consumers called any company we want to call, and we get a teleoperator that asks us to hit us 3 buttons to get to who we want to talk to? What do? We get frustrated and we hang up. Same thing happens in retail. That's what retailers have figured out. Automation is the future of retail. It's the physical presence, the personal service, which is the future of retail.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think there's a slice of stuff that automation works well. Sure. So there's there's a company that's making robots that flip hamburgers and cook, making more tortillas for Chipotle. Like that kind of thing is very specific. But if you're in the line at Chipotle ordering your burrito, you want to interact with a person, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, James, you and I have been to Bergstrom Airport in Austin, and you've seen that cappuccino machine, that automatic coffee machine. It's cool, it's clever, and it kind of has a bit of a sex appeal. But I think at the end of the day, that is a cool thing, but it's not the norm. That won't be the norm.
Yeah. All right. Here's one from Kiyama with a topic I love. So I'm starting to see the live, work, play project concept surging in Austin, Dallas, and Houston. And Naveen, we should mention you're based in Houston.
Correct.
Due to more remote workers, which is retaining talent. Do you see this continuing north in the mixed use development and remote work?
Look, I think there's a healthy balance of giving the worker for today some flexibility, right? I read something the other day that struck me as being pretty much based in reality, which is, so if you think about all these tech companies that are paying their software engineers 200 grand or 250 or whatever the number is, and they're working remotely, and it works for now, right? In other words, it's this kind of balance of paying them handsomely, but giving them the flexibility to work from home works for them from a culture standpoint, from a keeping your employees happy standpoint. But in 3 or 4 years, does the tech company wake up and realize, wait a minute, we're paying this guy $250,000 to code for us while he's working from home, while he's walking the dog? He's remote. It doesn't matter whether he's in California, Texas, the Philippines, India, he's remote. If I can get that same remote guy working for me for a third of the comp, I may do that eventually if the fact is that they're not coming back to work. So I think as soon as if a trend happens where employers start realizing that they're overpaying for remote working, and as a result, remote becomes universally remote, I can hire that person in Poland, wherever I want to, you'll probably see a number of people saying, wait a minute, I better keep my job by going to the office because they could remote me out to the Philippines or Indonesia or India, in which case I just lost my handsome gig. So yeah, we're in a short-term trend, and this environment of live, work, play, which I'm a big believer in. The young people demographically have spoken loud and clear. They want a flexible work environment, but they want a work environment where there is mass transit, there's live, work, and play in the same district, if you will. I think that whether you're seeing a slight, pull back on some of these areas, I think is temporary, because over the next 5 to 10 years, more people are going to work in these sunshine states. And they move to the sunshine states, Dallas, Austin, Texas, Houston, Orlando, Atlanta, et cetera, the more they're going to want the benefits of live, work, play within a defined space. So it's temporary, but at the end of the day, you will likely see a number of employers looking to get people back in their office. And that way you'll see more of a real thriving community over time. We're still in the first few innings of this kind of post-pandemic era. I wouldn't use 22 as an example of what 25 will look like.
Well, submitted a question earlier that kind of is tangentially related to that, which is talk about the difference between urban retail right now and shopping center and mall. Like it's almost like three different universes. And a lot of it has to do with people, the urban office worker not coming back. But what are your thoughts on that?
So let's talk urban first and some of the challenges with urban. Well, the biggest challenge with urban is that so much of urban is driven by tourism, either global tourism or domestic tourism. Number 2 factor for them is return to work. In both cases, strong urban cities, let's use New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Philly to some degree, Boston to some degree, these major urban cities that have a strong central business district employment factor and a strong tourism factor are the ones that are being challenged on the recovery return. Compare that to sunshine states, which are not as urban, that don't have mass transit, that have certainly a far larger territory to work in, have recovered. Like you've seen the numbers, James, as I have. Texas is back to pre-pandemic levels. Florida back to pre-pandemic levels. Georgia, the Carolinas back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of footfall, retail sales per square foot, et cetera. As a result, I think the urban markets have to think about the fact that for them, it's a long game. We got to get tourism back. When tourism comes back, I see numbers going back up. The malls, it's all about the difference between the mall shopping journey versus the shopping center journey. Consumers have proven, Placer AI data has shown that the today U.S. consumer is driving a lesser distance to go shopping, and they're making less stops in their shopping journey. The U.S. consumer used to make 5, 6 stops at a mall. Today, they're making 4, maybe sometimes 3, depending on the mall. So they're stopping less time or less dwell time in the mall. So that is all about, again, time. When does the U.S. consumer get comfortable making that drive to the mall? I think they'll come back. The best malls in America will never go away. Those are tourist destinations. Mall of America, Houston Galleria, Oak Brook, North Park, Short Hills, on and on and on. Those are all great properties. Roosevelt Field, they'll stay here for 50 years. Now, the suburban shopping center, that's where America shops. If you think about it, 10 years ago, it was a Kroger or a TJ is a Kroger with service retail around it. You had a McDonald's, you had a bank out in front of the pad, you had a Walmart with a bank and McDonald's out in front of Chipotle. And what do you have now? You have major U.S. brands fashion brands looking at taking spots. What do you hear from Sephora? Last year, Sephora said, we want to put our stores where the consumer is. And the consumer shopping at an H-E-B or a Trader Joe's shopping center or a Whole Foods. Levi's has said the same thing. A lot of brands are talking about how do we make sure we get to the consumer? I mean, Trek Bikes, they want to be in a Whole Foods. Why? That's where the consumer shops. So I think the dispersion of consumer shopping is really related to how close you can get to the consumer. And right now, the grocery anchor shopping center is a bellwether asset in the U.S. economy.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, bellwether asset. I never thought of it that way. That's fantastic. Well, Naveen, we're running out of time, but I want to ask you a fun question before we go. So you travel quite a bit for work. So give me a great restaurant, retail spot, shopping center, some place that you'd recommend people visit that you recently went to and that you liked.
All right. So this past spring, I was in San Diego for the first time in 4 years. And San Diego blew me away. I mean, I love the city, but what they've done to the urban revival in Little Italy and the housing and the high-rise developments they've put in, that's a thriving, beautiful city. If you've not been there in the last 3 or 4 years, I can't emphasize enough. Go to San Diego. There is a real livelihood, a real vibrancy to the CBD that wasn't there 5 years ago. Great restaurants. Little Italy is an amazing place. There's a restaurant that I've been to called Rovino that I think is one of the best Italian restaurants I've ever eaten in. I would highly recommend that. So here are the cities I like to visit. I love to visit San Diego. I'm a big fan of Atlanta. Went to Atlanta a few years ago, and I've gone to Atlanta quite a few times now. I'm not going to pick names because that's not fair, but here's what I'd say. From a foodie standpoint, the cities of Atlanta, LA as usual, Houston, an amazing food scene, a lot of great restaurants in Houston as well. There's a reason why all these cities have great food scenes. High levels of diversity, high levels of ethnic diversity, and ethnic diversity brings a high level of ethnic creativity to food. And so to me, when I travel, I prefer to shop with my stomach and my mouth as opposed to buying clothes. You can buy clothes anywhere you want to. So when I go to another city, I look for the hottest restaurants, the most creative restaurants. And most often, I look for an ethnic restaurant that gives me something I won't find if I go from one city to the other. So that to me, and of course, my bias is Indian food. I'm always going to look for an Indian restaurant when I go somewhere.
I love it. That's, I couldn't agree with you more. The diversity that comes from, when you're in a city with people from so many different ethnicities and backgrounds, and it's not just the food, it's the retail, it's the business. It's just, it's so exciting. So I love that answer. That was fantastic. So Naveen, what do you think? Do you think we've successfully accomplished our Ask Me Anything session?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought that the people that asked the questions live, thank you for Bill and others that were on there asking questions live. I appreciate you listening. Look, at the end of the day, we live in a fantastic industry. We live in a really exciting, fun time. Let's enjoy it. Let's take advantage of it. And let's give our clients and people who ask questions good, solid answers. And I hope I answered the questions you asked adequately.
Fantastic. Well, Naveen, have a good one. I'll see you again soon.
Thanks, James.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
And if you want to download our latest research reports, and believe me, we write a lot of them at JLL, go to jll.com. You can get the back to school survey that I was talking about. If you go to jll.com and go to the trends and insights section, it's all there for the download. We also do another audio podcast called Where We Buy. This week, the new episode is an interview with Meredith Darnell, who's with Brookfield Retail. We talk about all the interesting properties in their portfolio and the trends that they're seeing. You can find us on any podcast app that you like, or you can find us on the web at wherewebuy.show. And if you're not watching live and you want to see all those archive episodes, we keep them all over at YouTube. If you go to everythingweknow.show, that'll take you to our YouTube page. And while you're there, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That always helps us out. And when you subscribe, you can hit this bell icon so that you're notified when new episodes come out. And a lot of people like to watch us on LinkedIn. So to make sure you're seeing all of our new weekly episodes on LinkedIn, go to the JLL Retail page and follow us right there. So we're going to be back next week. Our new episode is going to be next Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern. So every week we ask ourselves, what did we learn about retail this week? I learned a lot. Just off the top of my head, I learned from Naveen how important diversity is to make great restaurants and retail and just overall experience in every city that you shop in. So if you want to know more of everything we know about retail, you can join us here again next week.